This is the operator meeting for December 13th, and we're starting early. Okay, Diane, let me share real quick and then you can take it away. All right, go ahead.
All right, this is a new operator guidance that should be on our website under the regulation operator guidance section soon, if it's not up there yet. But it's just adding some clarifications around Rule 434 in relation to how wells, once they're defined inactive, are supposed to be plugged. And so the guidance document just opens up with our rule citations like normal. The pertinent parts are the 100 series, the definitions of what an active well means, and then the 434C itself. If you scroll down to the second page, Hannah, you can kind of walk through this guidance document for everyone. So like I said, this is a guidance document just to try and help operators understand what is required once a well has been designated as inactive. So once a well has been designated as inactive, within 6 months of that designation, the well is required to be plugged and abandoned unless other appropriate action is taken. And so first step is knowing how and when a well becomes inactive. And so based off the well status, wells become defined inactive at different time periods. So again, it's in the 100 series, or here in the guidance document, you can see that if a well is shut-in status, it can be shut in for 12 consecutive months, and then after that, it's now designated as inactive. If it's a temporarily abandoned well, so it has a TA status for 6 consecutive months, it then gets designated as inactive. And so once that designation becomes in effect, there is a 6-month clock that the well is supposed to be plugged and abandoned or take other appropriate action. So the default is assuming we're going to get this well plugged, but there are other options if plugging work isn't what is planned for the future of this well. So you could either return that well to service. Depending on the well status, again, there are different criteria that will meet that obligation. So you can either finish drilling that well, complete and produce the well, return a well to production, or start using an injection well again. So if you've started using the well and then your Form 7 monthly operations reports reflect that the well is now being used and is active, the inactive designation goes away and the well is now active again. Another option is to submit a Form 5B inactive well notice. And so that gets the well designation as designated as inactive, and it will kind of follow our normal inactive well, like how we like to think of our TA sundries or shut-in wells, whatever is needed for that well status. So you would submit the Form 5B. It is not reviewed by excuse me, any COGCC staff. It comes across automatically. And then just a different reminder that if the well is TA, you need to make sure you also have your TA sundry and any MITs that are required. And then if the well stays inactive out there for TA status long-term or shut-in, follow-up sundries or follow-up, sorry, not sundries, follow-up MITs may be needed on the time period whenever MITs are required. And Hannah, I just lost my guidance document.
Oh, sorry, just a sec. Okay.
But so yeah, just let me start back here. Other option is to submit a Form 5C, and that is reviewed by staff. It will be routed to the engineering department, and the 5C is an inactive exception request. And so there must be a very specific special situation that the operator thinks that even though the well is meeting the criteria for inactive designation, that is not appropriate for this well. So it'll be a very individual case-by-case basis. We're not expecting to see many 5Cs get submitted. It's going to probably be rare because the definitions and the rules are very clear about what makes a well inactive. And so it's going to be, like I said, a case-by-case when that 5C gets submitted. And then kind of how these relate to each other. If you're submitting a 5C for a well because you think the inactive designation is inappropriate, do not submit a Form 5B because the 5B means you're noticing it as inactive. So those two don't really jive well together. The other option to take action on an inactive well is to submit a Form 6A with the well listed on the form, and that will designate the well as out of service. When you designate a well as out of service, it can never produce hydrocarbons again, and it will be assigned a plugging due date, and the due date for when the well must be plugged and abandoned by will be dependent upon how many wells are listed on that Form 6A. So your options are, once the well has been designated as inactive, to plug that well, return it to service, submit a 5B or submit a 5C or submit a Form 6A. And so these are all sort of independent of each other. So if you've returned it to production, we obviously don't need a Form 5B. If you've plugged the well, you don't need to take any additional steps because now the well is plugged. If you've submitted a Form 6A, we don't need the Form 5B. So these are independent criteria actions. You can take different forms, different options for the operator to do. It's just all of these actions must be completed within that 6-month window of the well being designated as inactive. So make sure you're submitting your forms timely enough that staff has time to review them, and also allows yourself time to complete the work, because it's not just getting the form submitted and month 6 and saying I'm good. It's these actions need to be completed by. So obviously if you returned it to service or you've completed your plugging, you're good. But if you've just submitted your 6 and 10, and you haven't actually gone out there to rig up and perform the plugin operations, you're not in compliance with this rule. Go to the last page, Hannah. Thank you. And this is just kind of some examples walking through, if you've had a TA status for a well, you can be TA status for 6 consecutive months, and then you must take action within that next 6-month window. And so just kind of different scenarios here outlined, and then a little chart at the end clarifying, look, you can have your well statuses for, SO, WO, SI, TA for what time period, and then it becomes designated as inactive, and then all of them are given a 6-month window. But depending on the well status, the timing is a little different on how long they can be at that well status before they are designated as inactive. And so, like I said, this guidance document will be out on the website, just trying to provide some clarifications and make sure everyone understands that once your well is designated as inactive, action has to be taken to keep it in compliance. That is all I have for this topic. For the other couple things I was on the agenda, I'll just slide right into Hannah for you. It's just reminders, so I don't need anything on the screen. Just want to remind folks that the difference between kind of planned and unplanned events and what needs to be submitted. So we are seeing more Form 42 move-in rig up notices coming in after a rig has moved in. If it's truly unplanned, that's understandable, and we have that allowance in the rule for unplanned work. But if it is unplanned, get that Form 42 submitted as soon as possible, ideally that day when you're moving in, or I think the rule allows for up to 1 day after the event or the work has started. But if it's unplanned and not routine, that also implies you probably needed a phone call or email to get verbal approval to perform whatever the work is, and then you'd follow up with a Form 4 312 sundry notice. So there is the option for unplanned work to get out there, get the verbal approval, but there's other documents that need to follow after the fact. But if it's planned routine maintenance, the Form 42 move-in rig up notices are required to be submitted 2 business days ahead of time. And those notices go out to field staff, to local governments, go into the well file, and help keep that record and clear what's going on out there. And so it helps people if those are submitted timely and appropriately, and that we're understanding the difference between unplanned and planned, and getting those notices submitted timely. And sort of related to that, my other thing was for the 312 sundry reminders that routine well maintenance is not required to have a 312 sundry notice for subsequent well operations. So we have that guidance document that's been out on our website for a while. It works through some different examples of what is routine and what also requires the 312 sundry notice. So, you know, if we're doing some routine tubing repairs during daylight hours, we don't need that 312 sundry notice. That is all I really had today. So I'm ready to pass it off to someone else.
Great, thank you, Diane. Next up, we have subsequent work in PA and wildlife areas. That'll be John Noto, and let me just queue up your presentations. So, and you should, actually, you may not be able to mute yourself yet. Give me a second to host you. Oh, you should be able to, John.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Awesome.
Just give me a sec. Okay. There you go.
There we are. Thanks. Well, good morning, everyone. This wanted to have a follow-up to a presentation. I guess we can go to the next slide, please. Greg Duranlo gave a presentation on September 13th where he announced that we were going to have a guidance and gave some general overview and instructions about what we're talking about today, which is CPW consultations in wildlife areas where we have existing locations for operations like P&As. So the title of the guidance is here in blue: CPW consultation process for operations of wildlife habitats at existing oil and gas locations, which is one of our longer guidance titles. Next, please. So we're going to cover in that, and I expect that guidance to be published this week. Form 6s, Rule 312 sundries for subsequent operations, applications for permit to drill, Form 2s, and a Form 27, the site investigation and remediation work plans. Next, please. So this is a basic process that Greg went over and that many operators are already doing as you're working with our OGLA staff. So basically just 3 simple bullets was all I think I needed to explain the basic process. One is that the operator in advance of submitting the form should review their location. They can use our website in the GIS and other supporting websites to determine if you're in a wildlife habitat that's a mapped habitat on our system and by CPW. In advance of submitting the forms, you've identified that you're in a wildlife habitat. You can contact CPW in advance of communicating with us. This saves a step and gets us out of the middle of those conversations and makes it much more efficient. Then when you submit your form, you can have the results of that consultation in the form of best management practices. And those might include timing stipulations or operating constraints. Next, please. So next step for us after the consultations happened between the operator and CPW, you can submit the form. We'll review it and verify that all the necessary consultations occurred based on what the wildlife habitat is. We will review any best management practices that were the result of those consultations, and they may need to be transferred on the 6s and the 27s as conditions of approval, because that's just the way the form is structured. You don't have the ability to put BMPs in Those BMPs on the Form 6s and Form 27s are going to be in form of comments. If additional follow-up work is needed or determined to be needed, we will potentially add an additional COA for consultation. And examples of that is where the operations may encroach upon a timing window, or where the wildlife survey is necessary prior to commencing operations. If none of the steps happened that I just described, then we will initiate a consultation with the form that was provided, and then in that case, operator will need to contact CPW and need to work out any mitigation measures that are necessary, and we'll coordinate that. Next, please. I think that's the end, actually. So, if there are any questions, I know we're taking those at the end. Thanks.
Great, thanks, John. Next up, we have a surprise notification from Mark Schlagenhoff. It will be flow line requirements. And Mark, just give me one moment to give you the ability to unmute. Okay, Mark, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, I am unmuted. Can everyone hear me?
I can.
Yeah, this is Mark Schlagenhoff, the Engineering Integrity Supervisor. We just wanted to give everyone a quick reminder about Rule 11020, which deals with out of service, off location flow lines and crude oil transfer lines. And so since we have a lot of production facilities going out of service in conjunction with the financial assurance rulemaking, we wanted to point that out. One of the main things would be the out of service lock and tag. So it's not a new rule, or it's nothing new. It's just the type of thing everyone's doing. But typically after you shut that well in, you have 90 days to do a out of service lock and tag. And so we just wanted to put a reminder into everyone to review Rule 11020. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And that concludes the presentation and announcement portion. So we'll go ahead and jump into the Q&A. I already see plenty of questions, so thanks everyone for those. The first question is, the CDPHE process is lengthy and costly. If we have a permit from CDPHE, does the COGCC still claim it can prohibit properly approved combusting? Scott, I think that one's probably for you.
I'm sorry, I was multitasking.
Oh, no worries. The CDPHE process is lengthy and costly. If we have a permit from CDPHE, does the COGCC still claim it can prohibit properly approved combusting?
Absolutely.
All right, and they also ask for legally, please outline your standing. Maybe you'd like to email that person individually.
I think it's really simple. The legal standing is the adoption of the rules that say flaring has to have the approval of the commission, regardless of what the CDPHE has permitted. CDPHE's focus is emissions. Our focus is mineral production. And those are two different scenarios, although they are linked in ways. So the short answer is the adoption of the rules is the legal foundation.
Great, thank you, Scott. The next question is,
Thank you for adding functionality to eForms related to multiple users. I am now able to see that another user submitted a Form 8. However, I am unable to view the contents of the form when selecting Print under the Actions tab. It routes me back to the dashboard.
So Hannah, if you can let me share my screen, I meant to demo this functionality, and I think the comment below that is also related to an error. So we'll may have to follow up with that. But if I can share my screen, I'll show everyone this
Sure.
functionality of multiple users. Okay.
You should be able to share. Yeah.
I think I can. Okay, so this is in relation to the new eForms platform. So that would be this link here, and it's also accessible via other places. Once you log into it, you will see that you have start a new form section, document search section, and my forms. My forms is like it was before. That is only your form. So ones that you've created, that's all you'll see there listed in that bunch. But when you now put in your operator number for a document search, and so this is for the COGCC test documents. If I search on this, it's going to give me results for anyone who submitted a form for operator 5, in this case COGCC. And I know people are having some issues with printing and viewing, but at least for me, it appears to be working. So I can go in and I can edit this and see this is somebody else who's put this in here, and I can make changes to it. You also can choose the print functionality. It should, if it's working correctly, give you a document that looks like this that you can download and print as a PDF. And then finally, the review process was working. Here, same idea, it just pops up a form review. So once you put in your operator number, you should see everybody else's who's submitted if you have multiple users for an operator. So that's it.
Great, thank you, Chris. Just give me a moment. Every time I share or unshare, everything gets moved around. It's super fun. Okay, let me see if I'm up to date on my chat. Oh no, it's way up here. Okay. Thank you for that question, and thank you, Chris. The next question says, oh, it's related to the same thing. Same as Jen, I can see multiple users listed, unable to view, edit anything, always says fail to load. An error occurred while loading in the form review. And then it had an unhappy face, and they like that. So I think you answered that question, Chris. We'll just go ahead and move on. The next couple were direct message to me, so I'll send those to you just a sec, Sabrina. If we plan to plug next year as after STIPs, and we don't already have the 6 intent improved, should we submit a 6A out of service first? And I can read that again.
And it's probably for me. Can you read that again?
Yes, just 1 second. Let me scroll back up to the top. Okay. If we plan to plug next year after STIPs and we don't already have the 6 intent approved, should we submit a 6A out of service first?
You don't need to submit a 6A to designate the well as out of service, as long as you're staying within your timelines to get that inactive well plugged within that 6-month window. So if it's been designated as inactive and you know you're going to plug it next spring and it's within that 6-month window, you're fine. If you're going to be outside that 6-month window when action was required, you should take additional steps to either submit the Form 5B, the notice it as inactive, or you could put it on a 6A if you want. That will give it a plugging due date and you can't ever produce it again. But if the due date will be longer than, just getting it outside the required STIPs window you might have had for 1 year, but that could also work fine. But it doesn't have to be on the 6A. You could take the 5B action as well, or if it's in that 6-month window period, you can go ahead and just take care of it during that and not do any additional forms besides your 6 intent and then rigging up to plug it.
I just want to jump in here and add a note of caution regarding using the 6A. Diane mentioned it. We do not review your 6A submissions. We simply accept that you are designating them as out of service as defined by the rules. And that means that well cannot be returned to production. If you make a mistake on your 6A, it's a commission hearing to undo that, right? The rules have not given us the administrative flexibility to put wells on and off the out of service list. It's an instrument the commission provided for you to avoid having to provide financial assurance for that bulk of wells that you know are no longer producible or that you have no intention of producing. So my word of caution is be very careful. Make sure that you have thought through what you're putting on your 6A, because once you've done it, it takes a commission hearing to undo it. And then I'm not sure that they would. I mean, the commission can do whatever they want, but there's no automatic disposition of an application to take a well off of a 6A. So just be careful with your 6As, or be intentional with your 6As, I should say.
Great, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Diane. The next question is kind of, there's multiple ones, so I'm just going to try to read them all through, and then hopefully one person can answer them. When you file a Form 42 for a move-in rig for maintenance, the rig doesn't show up when planned on the date specified. Do you just keep filling out more 42s? This is just replace tubing and pump. And then we ask a clarifying question. Can you please expand your issue with the 312 sundry if it is being submitted?
I think Hannah,
You can
or
just-
I think those might be unrelated first. The Form 42, if the date or time changes for when it was submitted for, if it's within 1 to 5 day change, contact your area inspector, document that contact with a follow-up email that includes the time, date change, and then you're fine. If it's outside that 5 day window, submit a Form 42 updated or revised. I'm blinking now on what the actual text on the Form 42 is, but there's should be a checkbox where you can say you're updating an existing Form 42, and that's only if you're outside that 5 day window. Otherwise, you're going to contact your local area field inspector and notify them of the time change. There is guidance on our website related to Form 42 notices. It has not been updated after we've had the mission change rule number changes, so it's still under the old 316 for field operation notices. But if you search under operator guidances for Form 42 or field notices, you should still be able to pull that up. And I think most all of it is still relevant, but like I said, it's the old rule numbers rather than the new ones.
Great, thank you, Diane, and you're right. The right question with thank you for that. And thank you for that question as well. And the next question is, do you have any tips on creating the Rule 312 sundry? The form does not recognize any of the API numbers on a pad. This is for DUC completions. Then the follow-up question was, can you explain on your issue with the 312 sundry if it is being submitted on the pad location IDs versus on the well? And then they replied, the 312 issues is when submitting for a pad, I create the form M4 of the form 4 with the location ID. When I try to add the API numbers for the well on the pad, I get error messages that are an error message that says the wells are not on the pad. The API numbers are required for submittal. And then I'm being asked to ask that question asker if they can send an example doc ID so that we can troubleshoot the issue. And you can send that to Diana Byrne. I'm going to drop her contact information in the chat for you. And thanks for that question, Julie. I'm sorry we can't answer it right this second. Okay, so that's her email. And then the next question is, that's not a question, okay. I think that's the end of the questions for now. I've got a couple other kind of comments that I can't really associate too well. So I'm going to see if I can put those together somehow, but otherwise I think we're done with questions for now, unless folks are typing in as they speak. My apologies for being quite distracted today. I set up at a new computer setup and it's not been ideal. So thank you for bearing with me and for the patience.
And I think that that's it. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I do think that we have our last financial assurance weekly meeting next week for the year, and then we'll kind of assess after that what we need to do. But otherwise, thank you everybody for attending. If you need to be added to the operator list, please email me here at this email address on the screen. And then if there's any questions about the financial assurance form specifically, you can email Jane directly. Otherwise, oh, go ahead. No, just kidding.
Yeah,
Don't email Jane directly.
yeah, Jane's fixing to go off the reservation, so email Chris.
Oh, got it. Okay, let me put Chris's information up there for folks, but first let me find the screen. Oh, I'm never gonna work out of this office again. There we go. There's Chris's email address.
Hannah, you're not sharing.
Oh, never mind. Sorry.
So we have a comment that adds to Scott's points that he made about the Form 6A, that you need to be very thoughtful before you put a well on there. Scott said a well cannot be returned to production. If it's an injection well, it also cannot be returned to injection once it's put on a Form 6A.
Thanks, Jane. And I did get one last question. How long until FA hearings are expected?
I have not checked in with our hearings unit manager regarding how quickly those hearings are being scheduled. And so, you know, I do think there's the normal notice process. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking February or March would be the earliest that those hearings could be scheduled, but you know, I'm sure that the hearings unit will be posting, you know, notices for comment as soon as they have been able to process them.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending the meeting today. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Otherwise, have a great day. Bye.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Hannah.
everybody.
Bye.